Welcome to my podcast. I'm your host Sajad, and today we have a huge software engineering content creator that we're going to be talking to. Her name is Urvashi, otherwise known as The Code Dose on YouTube as well as Instagram, which is actually her biggest platform, in which she has over 260,000 followers. We're going to be talking about how to break into tech from the perspective of a complete beginner, someone with some experience, as well as someone who's international trying to get USA opportunities. She's also going to be sharing her resume with us, so there's a lot of value in this episode. And without further ado, let's get started right away. Hey Urvashi, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. How are you doing today?
Hey Sajad, I'm so happy to be here. It's about 10 p.m. I'm doing great.
Cool. And I guess I want to get straight into it. I gave an introduction about yourself, but I kind of want you to give an introduction about yourself as well. So you have a social media platform. You've been in tech for a while. Give us a background about yourself and how you broke into tech.
So I actually started programming when I was in my high school. So we had this course for C++, and I was confused if I should take up medical or if I should take up non-medical. So non-medical is where people study computer science, and again in non-medical, we had two options if I wanted to go for engineering drawing or if I wanted to take up C++. I enjoyed computers always, so I decided to take up C++. I enjoyed that course a lot. My teacher was very, very encouraging, and that's when I developed the interest to go for C++ or go for computer science in my higher studies as well. So I did a 4 years degree in computer science, and after graduating, I joined HackerRank, and after that, I've worked at a couple of remote startups, always working as a front-end developer. What about you?
Yeah, well, that was a really cool introduction. And I like kind of how you coming from like a background located in India, it kind of provides a lot of guidance to some of our audience who are international. And I think some of my audience, if you guys are new here who don't know, I got into tech through AP Computer Science. I took that in high school. I took that like junior year of high school, and I enjoyed it pretty well. And then I ultimately decided to major in that in college. So I went to Georgia Tech. I did my bachelor's and master's there. Really enjoyed it, and then just started working full-time as a software engineer. Did a couple internships. Things just made sense. Obviously, the money is good in this field, so no complaints there. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious about, so when you say that you were deciding between computer science and C++, what does that like mean? Because I didn't fully grasp that.
So I was deciding between C++ and engineering drawing. I don't know what it's called where you live, but we have this subject called engineering drawing. I think most students that take that up go for study architecture after that. But yeah, those were the two options that we had.
I see. So one was like the coding route, one was like the design route.
Yeah, design architecture, but I would say that you don't really have to study C++ to study computer science after you graduate high school. You could do either of them, because here in India, we don't really test for your computer science or your programming skills to be able to enter into a programming-based course.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Cool. So I guess going a little further into like your backstory when you're like actually like starting out and all that, just learning how to code, and for beginners, I know a lot of people who watch this video are beginners. So what are your tips as well as resources for people who are just trying to learn how to code?
So I am very biased towards the way that I studied computer science, which was I started learning C++. That was my very first programming language. So if someone asks me what language should they begin with, I would firstly I would advise them to start with C++ if they have enough time and patience. But if they are in a hurry, obviously JavaScript or Python is a better option. What was your first programming language?
You know, starting with C++, that's a pretty hot take because I don't think most people actually encourage that. In fact, at university, they always start you off with Python. I mean, personally, I started with Java in AP Computer Science, but why do you suggest C++? I'm kind of curious.
So I do know that either people start with C++ or they start with Java. I say C++ because I studied C++, But along with C++, I would either recommend C++ or Java, mainly because
Hmm.
I feel that when you start out with a harder programming language, you have a much stronger foundation into programming, and it's easier for you to take up statically typed languages or dynamically typed languages after starting with a statically typed language. If you
Oh, interesting.
started,
So
but
start harder. Yeah.
yeah, but if you started with something like Python or JavaScript, it's a little bit
Hmm.
harder to now get into C++. plus plus.
I see. I see. Cool. Cool. So I guess going a little further into that. So if you're starting with C++ or Java for that matter, what's like, okay, so I picked a language. What's my next step?
So usually you study the programming basics, which is your arrays, your fundamental data types, and what functions are or what operators are, your variables, constants. After that, I would suggest people to study a little bit about data structures and algorithms just to build those core
Hmm.
problem solving skills.
And I guess on that point, like to actually like learn those things, what should I use if I'm a complete beginner?
So again, I went to a university, those things were taught to us, but a lot of the times we ended up studying them ourselves via YouTube, or we also had at least where I used to live, we had this option of joining a course which was apart from the university. So that was a paid course that students will go and take up after their classes would end. I didn't take that
Hmm.
because everything was available for free to use, and I had the basics foundational knowledge with me. So I didn't feel too scared or too intimidated to start learning it myself via YouTube or via books and other resources available out there. But yeah, for someone who's doing completely everything by themselves, it's always good to have a guidance as well as a community of other learners around them.
Hmm. Hmm. So I'm getting your biggest recommendation is probably going to university in that regard.
Going to university, first, again, it depends. If I didn't go to university, I don't think I would have been able to do it myself. Even though I went to
Hmm.
university, I studied a lot of things myself. I learned full stack web development myself. But I also had this strong network of other students, of peers who were learning new things. And I was more aware about the opportunities out there because of this strong programming community that existed in my university, which otherwise would not have been possible for me.
The reason I asked that question is because I get a lot of comments saying, should I even go to university when we have boot camps, certifications, or I know a lot of people who become self-taught programmers. So I guess what's the advantage of going to university as well as maybe like some cons of doing the boot camps, or maybe what are like pros and cons of both situations? I'm curious to hear your opinions because I also have a few of my own.
Interesting. So, when I started learning, when I started my freshman year, boot camps were a little less common. Now we have a lot of boot camps, we have a lot of online resources, we have a lot of online courses, cohort style courses that are available. But back then, it was either university or you go to some external course available locally in your area. But
Hmm.
right now, if you have the option of a good boot camp, I think you're good to go. But again, in the job market, there might be a little bit of a bias towards someone who has a degree and someone who does not. And if you're able to get all of the skills required, if you're able to prove to the employer that you are someone who has the right skills, then obviously it would work out in your favor. But you will have to work a little bit harder to go and seek out those
Hmm.
opportunities, because in universities you get access to these placement cells, you get access to companies who are coming to your own campuses and looking for students to hire. Whereas when you are going through a bootcamp route, if your bootcamp provides you with a placement cell type of thing, then obviously you're in a good position. But otherwise, you'll have to seek out those opportunities yourself, and it's obviously going to be a little bit harder. What do you think?
Hmm.
Do
Hmm.
you think if someone who's starting out completely, do you think they should attend a boot camp or should they go for a degree?
Yeah, so learning how to code and actually breaking into tech and getting like a nice high paying software engineering job are two very, very different things. So I would suggest if you're just trying to learn like maybe one discipline or just like breaking down like how to code, an online course, bootcamp certification, go for it, have at it, do whatever you want. But if you actually want to build a good network, like you were saying, or even have access to more research opportunities or get access to the school's networks, like at Georgia Tech, we had a lot of career fairs. Like, for example, companies like Google, Microsoft would regularly visit us because they were in Atlanta and like it was just part of the network. And so you get access to way more career-wise if you go to university. And obviously, like university, their education is like top tier for a reason, right? So you really can't beat that. Like, sure, you can do the minimum to get into tech, but if you put minimum effort, you're probably going to get minimum results.
Very well said. So I get this question a lot of the time. So if a lot of the time students keep asking me if HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is enough. And the thing that I say to them is the amount of efforts that you put in is exactly proportional to the result that you're going to get. So more effort is going to get you more opportunities. But if you're going to do the bare minimum, you are going to get the bare minimum results from them. One more follow-up question on that. So if you were supposed to do it all over again, start programming again from scratch, would you go for a university or would you go for a boot camp?
Yeah, I mean, for the reasons I stated, I would probably do exactly what I did. I don't think I would have really changed anything. Maybe I would have tried to put a little more effort into doing some more like coding projects or take a few classes in college a little more seriously than I did. But other than that, I think like university, like the opportunities, and I think one of the most underrated things, it's not just about like the career networks, like by talking to like companies and recruiters, it's also you're surrounded by a lot of peers who are in the same field as you. So guess what? Now I have a lot of friends who work at top tech companies in different cities like San Francisco, New York City, Seattle, all these like big cities where there are a lot of tech companies at. So if I ever like need a job or need a referral, I have someone to reach out to. So I don't have any regrets as to what I did. What about you?
I agree with you on this so much. So I personally couldn't sit in the placement cell either for internships or for full-time offers because we have a CGPA requirement on my campus. But if I had to do all of this again, I would still go the university route because of the people I've met in those 4 years of university.
All right, cool. So now I want to transition a little over. So let's just say you completed university or you completed a boot camp and you're ready to actually enter into the job market. What skills do I need to focus on in order to, I don't know, like best my opportunities?
So it's very different in today's job market because junior roles right now are very hard to find. So maybe what I did when I was in university would not be enough, or maybe it would be enough because I haven't been in the job market for some time now. But what I would suggest is to maximize your opportunities. So there are probably two ways to get into the tech industry. The first way is to build a very strong skill set of technical skills. So that could be in web development or app development. And the other way to get into tech is to be really, really great at data structures and algorithms, because a lot of these big tech companies do hire exclusively via data structures and algorithms interviews.
Yeah, so you mentioned web development, and I know like a big question a lot of people ask is front end, back end, full stack. What's your recommendation here, and what resources should someone focus on?
My recommendation would be going full stack. Again, looking at the current job market, I see a lot more full stack positions than front end specific or back end specific. Back when I was in my university, we were still able to find just front end positions. So I got into the industry just learning just with the help of front end, but I gradually got into back end a little bit, and now I am a full stack developer with an inclination towards front end. But nowadays I do see a lot more full stack positions, and the only positions for front end that I've observed are more for senior based roles like leads, front end leads, or front end architects. So right now, again, to maximize your position, to maximize your opportunities, I would say learn both front end and back end, but pick one area where you want to go more deep into. And to answer where to learn these things from, there are like a wealth of resources, free or paid, available online out there. One of the resources that I personally have used throughout my university years and still continue to do so is Code Academy, because I like learning via a text-based or a reading-based method and then practicing things out. Practicing is something that is very important in tech. So if you're not writing the code out, if you're not practicing what you're learning, then you're going to forget it in a couple of days. So I would say go for project-based learning. You can also go for some tutorials online, multiple tutorials available on YouTube. There are several different websites available that have courses. So a few of my favorite ones are Coursera and Udemy or edX. On Coursera, you will find a lot of courses which are free to use. You probably won't get the certification unless you pay for it, but you don't really need the certification. You just need the skills. And these courses are actually created by some of the top universities in the world. So you can go take those courses, build some projects, and you'll be good to go. So the university that I went to, we did not learn JavaScript. We only learned C and C++ and a little bit about data structures and algorithms. So front-end, back-end web development was something that I learned myself. I'm not sure how it's like in universities in the US. Did your university teach you something related to the practical world of software engineering?
Yeah. So as part of my computer science degree, I think I had like maybe 2 or 3 courses that was actually software engineering focused. And by software engineering focused, I'm talking about like one of the courses was just like the agile methodology, how sprints work and like how Git works generally. And then I took another course that was called like advanced software engineering that was actually developing a web application. And I was actually like on the front end team for that project. And so that was like pretty much it. Most of the computer science degree is like focused on fundamentals, data structures and algorithms, object-oriented programming. Then it gets into theoretical side, the theory behind computer science, computer architecture, algorithms. And so kind of like the math side of it a little bit, but not really like web development, software engineering. Most of the stuff actually I learned on the job. I actually didn't know JavaScript till like one of my internships that I actually had to apply it in. So yeah, there's not a huge software engineering focus in university unless you at least like major or minor in software engineering.
Same for my university as well. A lot of courses on a lot of theoretical courses like operating systems or computer architectures, but not a lot of practical stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason that I kind of don't like computer science, or like I wouldn't say don't like computer science, but one of the things that I don't like about computer science is kind of how theoretical it goes into, given what I do right now on the job. Like all those math courses I had to take, all those like combinatoric discrete math courses that I absolutely hated and had to study so hard for, have absolutely no relevance in my day-to-day life now, which I really don't like.
We were actually taught two times. So in my freshman year and then in my sophomore year, we had 2 subjects for electrical engineering. And I was supposed to be studying computer science, which is wild to me. I hated electrical engineering.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just they're trying to make us well-rounded, but you ultimately have to choose on one field. And I liked what you were talking about earlier. So you were mentioning like certain resources, some resources that I know like for front-end development, free code camp, that's good. I know of Cody Tech. That's also like this nice resource to actually like help you learn how to code in many different languages. And it actually has like an AI assistant. So if you're struggling and you're trying to type out this assignment, it'll actually like give you pointers to help you like incrementally get better at programming. So I think that's really awesome there. All right, well, thank you for that. And I guess the next segment I want to get into is obviously one of the biggest things to breaking into tech is having a good resume. Because if you don't have a good resume, you have no shot whatsoever. And actually, you sent your resume in, and I want to put that up on the screen for us to review over. And first question for you is, what are some good things about your resume?
So I think I like the structure of my resume. I've only used this format. So the format that I'm using is by Career Cup, by the author of Cracking the Coding Interview. And I've always used this format. It's worked fine for me. So, and I also recommend other beginners to try out this. And what I like about this format is how simple it is. And also another thing that I like is that it's very popular. So the moment someone looks at this resume, they know exactly where everything is because it's a linear resume. I I think the recruiters are very familiar with it. They know where to look for what stuff. And I think it works for me and works for a lot of other people as well.
And one thing I like about your resume, I don't know if you did this necessarily intentionally, but the third bullet point of HackerRank, you said created this dashboard using these languages to like measure team productivity. So you say you created something using these technologies that had this impact. And this is like what we call the XYZ format. That's actually what Google recruiters encourage people to do. I don't know if you did that intentionally, but that's something really good about your resume that anyone watching this video should try to adopt.
So this is the first time I'm hearing this term, but I did run my resume once with the help of ChatGPT to optimize it. I don't remember the exact changes that it made, but yeah, it might have rephrased it using the XYZ format that you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if you don't know about it, you're doing it. That's awesome. Yeah. And the next question I want to ask is, what are some common mistakes people make on their resume?
So the most common mistake that I see people making is that they don't really describe the projects that they've worked on, or they don't really describe the kind of work they've done at a particular company or at a particular internship. They just mention the name, the position, and that's all about it. But what the recruiter is really looking for is the kind of work that you've done, what sort of experience you have, more than just listing down a couple of technologies. And one other thing that I recommend everyone to do is to go and add as many links as possible to your resume, because those links give you a lot of credibility. When you add links, what that shows to someone is that what you're speaking or what you are saying in your resumes, you've actually done that and you're not just making things up. So that goes for your GitHub links, your blog posts, your projects. Again, always deploy your projects somewhere online. It's free to do so. So add those links in, add links to your profiles, your LinkedIn profiles, so that if anyone comes across your resume, they know where to look for, what sort of work you've done, and can have a more complete picture about your background. And some other mistakes are definitely the formatting, the alignment. So a lot of people just write things up, but they don't really pay a lot of attention to the formatting or the alignment of stuff. But when a recruiter looks at it and they see that things are misaligned or there's some random spaces, then it obviously looks bad on your part that you've not really paid any attention to your resume, which is the most important thing at that point of time. Make sure everything looks well formatted, and there are multiple tools available out there to help you with that. This one, I actually came across this one website. I think it's called Resume Scored or Resume Worded. So it uses AI to... have you heard of that?
No, I actually haven't.
So it actually scores your resume. It gives you like a score out of 100 and tells you how to improve it.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And is it like, do you know what it's based on, what criterion it's like trained on?
I am not sure, but I tried running my own resume there and it gave me quite useful pointers. I think it again mentioned that you should be quantifying your achievements, like add more numbers to it. The impact that you talked about, add what sort of impact you made, and a couple of other stuff, like I think it asked me to rearrange the stuff a bit around. I don't remember, but I would recommend you to have a look at it.
And I guess, so kind of branching off your point about having the experience and a lot of people like not really talking about what they did. So I do a lot of like resume reviews on like my Instagram and TikTok. And one thing that I see a lot of people put is, okay, so I did this experience, and then they'll say, learned Java in this experience, or just like learned cybersecurity through this experience. And I'm like, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Like, you should say used Java to do this, because obviously that implies that you know Java well enough to do this project, and that's what they really care about. If you're just trying to say that you learned something, just put that language in your skills section. Like, what? There's no point in you specifying that you learned it. So that's one big thing. The second big thing, when I read resumes, and I absolutely hate it, is when people have high school stuff on their resume. Like, people do not care about that stuff. That stuff is in the past. Once you graduate from high school, you move the tassel from left to right. Everything from the last 18 years, please do not put on your resume, unless it's like some cool coding project. Like, college stuff is way more relevant and important for recruiters than anything from high school.
Yes, I have seen people doing that a lot. They mention how they are interested in singing or drawing or sports. I don't think that is
Yeah.
something that really matters to the recruiter, especially for coding related roles. So make sure that you're adding relevant stuff in your resume. Otherwise, you'll end up precious space in your resume because one more tip on the top of my head is keep your resumes to one page. I've seen people who are complete beginners, they are juniors, and they still have like 2 to 3 pages long resume. And recruiters don't have a lot of time to spend on your resume. So you just have a couple of seconds to make that first impression so that you convince the recruiter that they should spend more time going over through this resume, that you're worth spending more time on. So make sure you have the most impactful stuff right at the top of your resume and everything relevant in just one page. Don't waste your precious resume space in high school stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of the relevant things, so when I usually suggest taking out like things like singing, dancing on your resume, some people are like, oh, but then you have no personality. Well, guess what? If you want to show your personality, show it in like some parts of like a behavioral interview or like when you're just talking to them, if you're really trying to develop that human connection. Because no one's going to look at your resume and be like, oh, he knows how to sing too? Let me hire them as a front-end developer now. Right?
Crazy. Yeah, and you can actually show your personality through your projects. Like your projects don't have to be super serious. You could create fun projects. I've seen people create projects around cats and stuff. So have fun with your projects. They don't always have to be super serious.
Yeah, and like one suggestion I put in one of my videos is if you're interested in machine learning and you like basketball like I do, you could do like this NBA statistics predictor where you're predicting how many points this player will score based off of the previous data. Like there's a lot of stuff you can do in the tech world in things that you enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's when you create your own unique projects that make you stand out from the other people. When you actually put your own thought and creativity into it, that's when you actually attract recruiters.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your resume. I think that was really, really helpful. And the next part I want to talk about is, so people outside the US, international students, or just people in tech trying to get software engineering opportunities in the US, what are routes that they could follow?
There are a couple of different ways you can do that. So I've seen people who worked in companies like Amazon or Google, the big tech companies, but they've spent a decent amount of years working just in India. And after that, they've gotten the opportunity to move to the US and continue working for their companies there. I think the name of that visa is L4 visa. So it's a little bit easier to get as compared to the H1B visa. The other way to immigrate to the US and start working there is when people go for higher studies, they do their masters or their PhDs, they go to the US, and after graduating, they look for opportunities there and then they end up staying there. One other way to do that is if you either start working at a remote startup. So the last company that I worked for, I actually got the chance to go to Canada instead of the US because the H1B visa is super hard to get because of the lottery system. So they set up a new company in Canada. We had all of the process. We had our application started. I got my medical examination done, but that didn't quite work out due to other personal reasons. But yeah, that's like one other way to actually immigrate outside of your country.
Okay, so that's good to know. So I get a lot of questions as like a person who comes from like an international basis. How do I get a remote job? What's your answer to that?
I personally tried multiple different platforms. So when I was first looking for a remote job, I was doing a lot of cold outreach. I was applying to a lot of jobs online. So initially, there are a couple of factors that are working against you if you are trying to look for a job in a country that has a complete different time zone than yours. So people won't even look at your resume just because the time zone doesn't match. But what I did was I started searching for companies in the European regions because we had a good overlap of working hours throughout the day. So that worked out for me. But then again, in remote jobs, usually what I saw back then, as well as what I see right now, is most of these remote positions do require you to have at least 2 to 3 years of experience. But once you have that, the hardest thing after that point is to get someone to actually revert back to you, which takes a lot of efforts. You just applying to companies every single day. But the second time when I got my second remote job, that was completely through networking. I got someone to refer me. So that was, you could say that was an easy way out to get a referral and get a job in the US. So my suggestions would
Easy way, I'd say smart way out. I think you should always try to get a referral as best as you can.
Yeah, and that's why I recommended people to go for a degree if they do have the option to do that, because those networks, the person who did ended up giving me the referral was someone that studied in the same batch as me.
So you got that through a friend, but I guess if you don't know anyone from a particular company, do you have any, I guess, references or tips for people to get referrals?
So you can try out cold reach outs a lot of the times. A lot of the times, these smaller startups that are still in their early ages, a lot of the times the founders are actually interested in recruiting. So you can reach out to them directly via LinkedIn or Twitter. Or if you want to build a strong network, I would say go and attend tech workshops, go and attend tech meetups, conferences, as well as contribute to open source, because then also you get to work with people from around the world, and you never know when someone comes around an opportunity that might be helpful for you. So how would you go about looking for referrals if, let's say, someone was looking for a remote job or someone was just looking to switch companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably the easiest way that I've done it, and I'd recommend a lot of people to do it, is LinkedIn. So not only should you reach out to your connections, but also what you can do is, let's just say you attended a university. You search up that university plus the name of a company you're interested in, then you could see a lot of like your alumni who work at that university. You message them, be like, hey, I go to this university. I'm interested in opportunities at this company, maybe for internship or full-time opportunities. Could we maybe have a little discussion? And oftentimes than not, employees are interested in giving referrals because they get a nice referral bonus. And by nice, I'm talking about like $5,000, sometimes even $10,000 just for referring or successfully referring a candidate into the company. So they probably will refer you, and you just keep reaching out. The more people you reach out to, the better, because some people may not respond to your messages, some people may. And so as you just keep doing this, every time before you apply, just get a referral, you'll definitely, I'd say, like have a really, really strong chance of getting hopefully an interview and hopefully a job after that.
Has that ever like worked out for you? Personally, for me, that has never worked out for me.
Yeah, actually for like my internships, it works out for a lot of my friends. Actually, before every like internship I applied to, I always got a referral because I just had a lot of people in my network I could reach out to. So it made no sense of just cold applying if I had like that opportunity there for me. All right, anyway, so I just want to transition a little over to, as a person who's in tech, a content creator, and you have your website running like a bunch of things that you sell, how do you balance your time?
I don't really have like a fancy framework that I follow. I just have this notepad. It's a memo. It's divided into these 8 blocks, 7 for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every day before going to bed, I write out my tasks for the next day. One thing that has worked for me well is prioritizing the things a night before, so that I do the things that make the most impact in my day. I do those things first in the morning. And my goal is not really to tick every single thing off of my list, but just do as much as I can. And also just to be aware that these are the things that I need to do, because sometimes things just slip off of your mind, and that just and you tend to forget a lot of the things. So what works for me is writing those down, and actually like writing them down on a physical piece of paper. And apart from that, my jobs have always been remote, so everything has been flexible for me. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but my work life and my personal life are very much intertwined together. So I don't really sign in, I don't really sign off. I just go, I just spend the day how I feel like. If I feel like I want to take a break, I take a break. If I feel like working, I work. That's about it. What would be your tips? I want to learn from you.
You sound like you're living the life. Yeah, but in terms of like what I do, So I don't have like a fancy notebook with like 7 like columns or 8 columns. I pretty much have like this like stack of like sticky notes, and the night before I just like kind of write what I have to do, whether I have to like film something or I have a task at work, and then I just rip it off and then I put it on my desk and I'm like, okay, wake up in the morning, look at it, do, and then as I'm doing it, I like scratch it off so you get a little bit of the satisfaction of like completing something. So it's kind of like snowballs, you get more momentum and you keep working. And yeah, I obviously at first when I started doing this method, or when I even first started doing content, you tend to sign up for more than what you were anticipating, or maybe what you were anticipating was this amount, but it actually ended up being this amount. So it's a lot of like steady balance. At the end of the day, like there is no like golden rule. There are going to be times where you do burn out. There are going to be times where you do feel exhausted. And of course, it's fine to take a break, like you said. So that's kind of I don't have like any of those, I don't know, productivity guru tips to stay super productive. But as long as you know what you're supposed to do and you reasonably get good at like understanding what your time allocation looks like, I think anyone can pretty much balance their time. All right. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time, but like one final kind of like fun question is, what does your work setup look like? I know I'm interested to find out like other people's work setups. I know that's pretty hot to talk about. So tell us.
I'm a maximalist. I'm definitely not a minimalist. So I've collected a lot of things over the years, and my work setup is basically just I've basically just dumped everything into my work setup. So I like to travel a lot, and I tend to collect a lot of things while I'm traveling, especially for my work setup. So I would pick up a lot of DIY art stuff. I would make them, complete them, and then those end up becoming a part of my workspace. One thing that you'll find in my work setup is that it's very colorful. That's because I like to draw a lot. That's one of the reasons why I am inclined towards front end a lot. But I would
Creativity.
absolutely. So I also like a lot of cute things. So it might not be for everyone. My work setup is definitely not for everyone. But I like my work setup, and it's very personal, and it's very personal to me. So it is. So that's it, I guess.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you so much overall. I think this podcast was really helpful. I mean, I personally learned a lot, and I hope that the audience could derive some value of this. And I really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us today.
And so nice to talk to you. I've definitely learned a lot about, living as a software engineer in the US, and I'm looking forward to more of your videos.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care then. Bye.
Bye.